first is the first.
Yes, Sharon.
Brenda said she couldn't find it.
She sent it. Brenna?
Yeah.
She sent it.
Molly, right? Molly.
Should I open up everybody else's presentation?
I don't know if that's going to confuse them or not, so I'm not sure. There is the video and it's on the desktop instead of YouTube so that they can get to it faster.
Right here.
Yeah, so she can jump. She had certain parts of the video she wanted to get to and that way it doesn't have to buffer. So, do you want your video open?
I don't know how long it was.
Do you know what points, what timing do you want them?
I'll just open them all up.
Okay, sounds good. Shift tab, control tab will bounce you between different screens. If that, maybe not confusing, but yeah. Yeah, they should be. And it's touch screen too, they can do it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Michael, you can ask me. Testing the audio. Test.
Good, how are you? Is Eduardo here?
He better be.
Okay. I don't see. So I'm assuming that's on.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. And this one will just pass. We'll pass this to all the presenters.
Yes, yeah, that's the best way. So if they clip it there, you can just pass it like a mic. If you want to really tell you perfect, whatever you want.
We'll see. All right. I'm okay. How are you? Good. What time are we at here? We're at 2 o'clock. It's time to start. Oh, no, we're not. Is this fast? I must be fast. It's not.
57.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you have a nice holiday break? Oh, sorry.
Did not. No. It's been rough.
I guess that's honest.
I'm not.
Sorry, it wasn't
Yeah.
good.
If you see me looking slightly uncomfortable, there's a reason. So.
I'll try to send you some good juju.
I'm trying everything. So anything you got would be much appreciated. So I've got your PowerPoint pulled up. So if you just click on the PowerPoint icon at the bottom, still haven't seen Eduardo. I'm a little nervous. Is he downstairs? Okay. Hey. You better not be making too many changes because I've already got it pulled up here, ready to go. Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think we're going to need to install a sound system in here and get a microphone. So the people can hear. It gets loud. Okay. Okay. All right. It's 2 o'clock, and I think we're going to get rolling. I feel like I need to get a sound system in here. We get more people in here than I thought we could fit, and it gets loud. But thank you all for making time to be here today. I know this isn't always the most fun way to start your new year, but it is important nonetheless, I think, to get back on track and to think about where we're going. So what I'm going to do is do a quick walk through the agenda for today. The meeting is scheduled for 2 hours. We are going to try to have you out exactly at 4 o'clock. We will respect your time. So Eduardo, I saw you come in somewhere. Oh, there you are. Hi. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. Eduardo gets the last half here. So what I'm going to do is do a welcome and kind of a quick overview of where we're going. We have some staff updates and acknowledgments to go through as usual, then some general updates and announcements, things that are going on or will be going on. We have Mary Ellen McLean-Berdoz and Vicki Simmonsmeyer here to do the CPD Faculty Fellows Report. If you remember at our last meeting, we had Eduardo and Lisa, why can't I remember? Lisa Boyce, sorry. Yeah, that was my, Lisa Boyce did their Faculty Fellows report, and Mary Ellen and Vicki will do theirs this time. Then we'll talk about the new Faculty Fellows for this next year. Then we're going to do a quick walk through CPD objectives and key results, and I will explain that more when we get to that point. But really looking at the goals and what we're going to be doing this next year. A lot of people have been here long enough to know that we have core goals. We have lots of things that kind of float out there that we're trying to coordinate with, and I think we've come up with a method to hopefully tie it all together and to get it all to make sense and hopefully give you a vision of the overall direction that the CPD is going. So that'll be the first hour, all 5 of those, really quick. And then Eduardo, as I mentioned in our last meeting, is going to be doing part 2 of his diversity and cultural and linguistic competence training, this time focused on how we interact with others, looking at microaggressions, prejudice, privilege, and I think Mary Ellen's helping with this. If you're the special guest.
I am special.
There.
Yeah. And I know how to do
Yeah.
No classes needed.
Yep. So it's important that we pay attention to this, and I think that as we go through the objectives and key results, you're going to see that focusing on how we address the needs of various underserved populations is going to be really important to where we're going over the next few years. Then we'll end with some important dates and coming events, and we'll let you go and you can run away. So just a quick caveat. If I do get up and run away at some point in this meeting, don't worry, I won't be back. My daughter and I have been struggling with an illness these last week or so, more than a week now, and I'm still not completely over it, but I missed you all so much I had to be here.
We'll all be out next week.
Yeah, let's hope not. Let us hope not. Okay, so what I want to start with is really reviewing our mission and values. I think that we don't do this often enough, and I know that they're on our website, and I know that they're on letterhead and different places around, but Ty brought this up in December that maybe we don't revisit them as much as we should. So in the interest of showing that I listen, I thought it was good to revisit these, and they do set the context for our objectives and key results for the next year. So in terms of our mission, if you remember, when I came in, it'll be 3 years next week. It doesn't seem like it's been that long. It seems like it's been a very short period of time, but it will be 3 years. And when I first came in, one of the first things we did is engage in some strategic planning where we defined this mission and these values. And I still think that they fit where we're going. But in terms of our mission, it says, we are working together to create inclusive communities and improve the lives of children and adults with disabilities and their families through sustainable innovation, collaborative research, responsive service, and interdisciplinary training and education. And the values that guide that are innovation, inclusion, collaboration, and caring. And if you've watched our newest video that we premiered, our sort of overarching promotional video that's now on the front page of our website, you'll notice that that is focused around these organizational values and really highlighting how we meet these values. These values become important also in our objectives and key results, because as we strive to move forward, not only are we trying to address these values, but we're also trying to address our core goals. So our core goals here, and many of you have heard these over and over, but it's worth repeating. Before I came on, Cindy Rowland and several of you engaged in a 2-year strategic planning process. We will begin that process again next year. But during that process, we identified these 6 focus areas as what we would work on as an organization for the 5-year period between 2017 and 2022. And we continue to pursue these. So healthcare, mental health, transition, employment, personnel development, and accessibility are our main focus areas. That doesn't mean that we don't do things outside of these areas, and it doesn't mean that we don't look for other opportunities. But in terms of guiding our vision and what we want to do, this is sort of our path to getting there. And these are the areas that we've identified as needs in Utah, but also nationally as areas where we can make a difference. You'll notice in some of these, when we first started this in 2017, we didn't have many programs in mental health or in employment, really. And over the 3 years since I've been here, we have developed several programs in these areas and continue to work on developing more in these areas. And that's really something that we'll continue to see over the next couple of years as well. So, just like every year at the beginning of the year, we do our performance appraisals. Yes, that's coming up. It's everyone's favorite time of the year, but we're going to do performance appraisals again. It's important as an organization that we do the same thing and that we revisit our mission and our values, and we ask the questions every day. What do we stand for? Are we on the right track? And are we being guided by our values? And if we're not, that's when we need to think about recentering and refocusing what we do. It's a question that we all need to think about, and we all need to take time, and January is a great time to do it. Things tend to be a little bit slower, to really evaluate how we're doing personally on this mission and these values and how we're doing as an organization. And our mission and statement directly affects our organizational culture. You're going to see in some of the objectives for the next year that some of the ways that we're going to address sort of enhancing our organizational culture are driven by these values of inclusion and hopefully innovation. So anyway, take some time, think about these. I'm going to come back to these. This is just, I'm priming you. We're using psychology. We're using the priming effect. We're getting these in your brain now so that when we revisit them here in a little bit, they'll be fresh and ready to go. But I would, as you think about your performance appraisal, as you go through that process and fill it out and write your goals for the next year, think about how your goals and what you're working on are working to support that mission and how they are guided by those values. If they're not, then maybe it's not a goal that we should be pursuing. I think we put the CPD is very much like a boat. I'm going to use a metaphor here. If any of you have done rowing, competitive rowing, like Olympic rowing, where everybody's in the boat rowing together, I don't know if you've ever seen one of those boats where everybody's not in sync. It doesn't go very far, and frequently they tip over. They're pretty skinny things with a lot of people in them, and they're not terribly stable when they're not moving forward. And if everybody's doing their own thing, they tend to sort of flounder and not go anywhere. But when everyone's in sync, some of those boats are going well over 30 miles an hour. They're incredibly fast in the water. And I think as an organization, we're kind of the same way. If we're in sync and we're all moving in the same direction and we're all guided by the same values and we're in rhythm and we're all focusing on the same things, then we're actually making progress and making a difference. But when we're not, we kind of flounder and we struggle. So I'm going to use that floundering and struggling analogy throughout the day today. So, okay, so there we go. So now I'm going to jump now for something completely different, as Monty Python would say. Again, priming, getting you to think about this. What I want to do is introduce some of our new staff. We do this every staff meeting, so if you're here, you have a chance to stand up so we can see you. If you're online, I'm sorry you can't stand up, but we want to welcome you anyway. But the services division has hired quite a few new people over the last little bit. So Aubrey Foy, is Aubrey here? No. Okay. Heather Mitchell. There we go. Heather's right in the back there. Okay. Scott Bell. Scott's here. Scott's right there. So glad to have Scott on. Scott, I keep saying this. I promise I won't do this. Scott's the new Daisha. So Scott brings his own set of talents and skills, and we're really glad to have him on board. Stormy Bennett. She's in Southeast. That's right. That's why it says Southeast right there. Yep. Duncan Johansson. There we go. Welcome, Duncan. Michelle Weller. Nope. Okay. Molly Kenning. Hi, Molly. Welcome. Victoria Yates. Dakota Johnson. And then Cass Madsen. There we go. Hi, Cass. Hi. Natalie Ashcraft. And Emma Catmull. Say no. Okay. Well, so we're actually lucky. I think this is the most new services people we've ever had in one of these meetings, because usually folks from the services division and early intervention are usually out and about doing good in the world, and they don't have time for us here. So that's not true. But they are out and about. The miles that the services division puts on their cars and their bodies every year is really remarkable, and we're glad that you've joined us. Okay, this is very sensitive. Research and training has just a few new people in the AT program. We have Raymond Emmert at the AT lab. I don't know if he's here today. I don't see Raymond. Okay. And then the Family Place Evaluation Project, I think both these people are in Salt Lake. Oh, they're here locally. Oh, there you are. Perfect. Samuel's right back there. Hi, Samuel. Stand on up. Sorry, I didn't see you. Samuel, I'm used to these folks being in Salt Lake, so I'm shocked that there's somebody local. Welcome, Samuel. And then Rebecca Mitchell. Is Rebecca here?
Probably not.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, we're glad that you're joining our family here, and we're glad that you're joining the Family Place Evaluation Project. You get to work with Mark, which we all want to work with Mark. Fortunately, not all of us are that privileged, right? The Technical Assistance Division has hired 2 new people, Frank Podobnik, who is in Montana, who hopefully is online, but then also Kimberly Hutter, right there. She's not going to stand up. She's going to be shy. She's sitting next to Dave. There we go. Kimberly moved from Texas to join us, and we're glad that you did so. Frank and Kimberly bring extensive experience working at state departments of education in Montana. Frank was actually the special ed director in Montana, and Kimberly worked for the State Department of Education in Texas. So both bring extensive experience at the state level, and we're really glad they're joining our TA team here. So thank you. And then in administration, we have this one hooligan named Meridian Wappett. She's back in the corner there. So she may or may not be related to me. It depends on the day. And then Leah Parr has joined the Public School Partnerships AmeriCorps project. I bet Leah's out in the schools today. Meridian, if you remember at our last business team, or our last staff meeting, we talked about a digital journalist, somebody who's going to be helping us develop more video content. That is Meridian's job, and she will be working extensively. When we made the promotional video that's on the current front page of the CPD website, they gave us hours and hours and hours of footage. And Meridian's job is to go through that and to pull together various promotional clips for different programs here at the center. So we'll be pulling some together for early intervention, for employment, for other things to highlight what we do here. You'll see that's a big part of our goals. But the other thing to realize is with Meridian and her extensive time and talents, you can call on her to come and take pictures and to take video and to help document your various program activities. So if you need to schedule her, I would reach out to Kelly Smith. She's kind of managing. Kind of, yeah. It's hard, I know. I can empathize. But really one of the things that we struggled with is getting actual video and pictures from things that are going on in the field. And that's really Meridian's job, is to get out and to gather that information so we can highlight what it is that you do out in the field. So, okay. We also have a few retirements. Many of you know Shauna Crane. Shauna Crane started her career and ended her career here with TACE. And she retired in November, was it? I'm trying to think. Was it? Yeah, it was November, I think, that she called, end of October, right. But Shauna started at the CPD in 1985, was here for 30 years, sort of worked her way up, and was the associate director of TACE when she retired. And she decided that she had other things that she wanted to do, but we will miss Shauna immensely, and I know that she leaves big shoes to fill in TACE and the TA division. Kathleen Kearney Reeves is another longtime staff member down in Southeast. Many of you probably have not met Kathy, but Kathy worked down in Price in the Southeast area early intervention program for 20 years, and also decided that she needed to take some time off. And
We got twin babies.
oh, okay.
So that
Okay.
the turning point.
Yep. Family. It's an important thing. So have we hired a new nurse down there in Southeast yet?
That was that Stormy?
Oh, Stormy. There we go. Okay, perfect. So Kathy has retired. The other sad news, some of you probably saw this on our Instagram yesterday, Derek Earl, who worked at DSL, died on December 23rd over the break. He worked at DSL since 2013. He provided respite service for the participants down there. Some of you probably saw this photo as it made national news. He was kind of an Aggie super fan and very recognized at all the games and athletic events. But he passed away over the break. And between our last staff meeting and this one, we also lost a member of our AmeriCorps Public School Partnerships program. So we've brought a lot of new people on. We've also lost some very good people as well. So awards and acknowledgments. There's a few things I think that are worth pointing out. If you were here in December and got to join us for our big holiday luncheon, you know that we gave out our annual Spirit of Service Awards there. Brenda Smith, Kaylin White, Tom Bowman, and Connie Panter received the awards this year for really, as Sharon actually wrote this, making CPD a great place to work. And that's really what it is. We couldn't do our jobs without these people, and they really are the grease behind the engine that is the CPD, and we appreciate all their effort and hard work here. Sachin Pavithran up here also has been busy, sort of. Sachin was the president-elect last year, and as a result had to organize our annual Association of University Centers on Disability conference. Those of you who haven't been to AUCD, there is a large parent organization that the CPD falls underneath. Every state has a center like the CPD. Some states have two. And AUCD is the large organization that sort of coordinates a lot of our efforts. Sachin was the president-elect and had to run the annual conference, which had over 5,000 people this year, or something like that. It was, what?
1,200.
1,200? It was only 1,200? Oh, it seemed like a lot more. Okay, there's 1,200 people. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Oh, okay, yeah, it's details. Anyway, still a lot of people. Yeah, I'm working on it. It feels like, I thought I heard somewhere there was way more, but anyway, okay. Well, so anyway, with that, Sachin doesn't get to break. Sachin now is the president of AUCD, so he went from president-elect to being the president, and will be in that position for this next year, which means that he gets to be in charge of the search for the new executive director of that organization. Those of you who knew Andy Imparato, he came and visited here a couple of years ago. He has retired and moved on to the Disability Rights Center of California as the executive director there. And Sachin now has to chair the search for the new replacement. So no pressure. Yeah. Cindy Rowland, who I'm hoping is online with us. Cindy was recently honored with the Richard Johnson Award, which is given to an individual every year who makes significant contributions to e-learning and WCET during their career. What does WCET stand for?
Western.
I looked it up. Actually, and I can't remember what it was. I realized I should have revisited that.
It acronym embedded in there, like the first it actually is witchy, isn't it? Like. Yeah,
it was it's a big national organization with lots of e-learning. Anyway, Cindy's been involved with them for a long time, and to get the Richard Johnson Award, which is their highest honor for leadership, is a tremendous, I think, acknowledgement of her contributions to the field. And then last but not least, Hadis, who is sitting in the back there. You didn't know you were going to get this, but Hadis has been MSW intern with us in the Research and Training Division. She's been working with Jeff Sheen and some of the other folks in that division, became a new citizen of the United States. I know. So congratulations, Hadis. We're glad that you're here with us. Okay, general updates and announcements. It hasn't been terribly busy, but there are some things that have occurred over the last few months that I think it's worth noting. TACE has gone through some restructuring. In December at the TACE quarterly meeting, John Copenhaver stepped down from the directorship of TACE and turned over the reins to Norm Ames. So Norm has served as the associate director of TACE for 7 years. Here, is he? What's that? Oh, he's on a call. Okay, yeah. 8 years. Okay, I knew it was 7 or 8. Okay. And so Norm sort of knows what it takes. Now, of course, nobody can fill John's shoes, and there's a lot of, those are, it would make me nervous, John, to try to, to try to even take over. But John will continue to serve as the TA division director and will still be involved with TACE. But there will be some administrative shifts and restructuring as TACE moves forward into their next evolution. The other thing I was hoping to show you today, but it's not quite there, but we are in the process of rebuilding the intranet. Those of you who've been here a long time have hopefully been on the intranet. It's a terrible website that looks like it was built in 1987, which it was. Unfortunately, there's a lot of important things housed there, and I think the way that it looks and behaves is a disincentive to people using it. It has all of our policies, it has all of our letterhead, forms, templates, scheduling, everything is there. So we're in the process of trying to redesign that, make it more up-to-date, and make it more user-friendly. So you will be seeing updates on that in the next couple of months, and when you see those updates, please respond to the request. One of the things that we need, and we have continued to struggle with this, is getting people to do their staff profiles on the intranet. When we write grants and contracts and have to put together staff lists and talk about the capacity that we have here, we pull from those bios so that we know who we have. We have over 250 employees at the CPD. We can't know everybody, off the top of our head. And so these staff profiles give us somewhere where we can go and say we have 5 staff members who have expertise in this area and this and that. And it's also somewhere where others can go and look and see what you do and what it is that you're involved with. So we will be doing another push for staff profiles. Part of that, Meridian, will be going out and taking pictures of you if you have not provided us with a picture. So please watch for that to be coming. Again, I'm priming you for what's coming. The other thing that's coming up is bathrooms. We will have bathrooms, shockingly. If you haven't used the bathrooms in this building, you haven't experienced, there's a lot of experiences in there, but the bathrooms leave much to be desired. And so we've been working to try to update and bring them into more of the 20th century. 21st century would be nice. We'll settle for the 20th century. And we've learned more about bathrooms and university policy over the last few months than we ever wanted to know. It's actually been a lot of back and forth and who pays for bathrooms and what you can and can't do and codes and everything else. Needless to say, I think we've got it all figured out, and we will be updating bathrooms across the center on all floors over the next few months. So we'll keep you up to date, but please watch. We may have to close bathrooms on certain floors for certain periods of time. So anyway, just again, warning you that that is coming up and that you should be aware of it. I am not entirely certain that we will be able to get ventilation in the bathrooms, for which I'm sorry. But
I could bring that grinder back here.
I know. Kelly has threatened to install her own. Who builds bathrooms without ventilation?
Apparently, all new architects. Not in that.
Really? Did they do it in there too? Yeah. Anyway, Janelle, you were gonna.
I was just going to say the Sorensen, and you could do some potpourri.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Again, far more time on bathrooms than any of us needs. So, okay. The next thing that I'm going to ask, and you'll be seeing more coming out about this in the next few weeks. In the next few months, actually, between now and March, we're going to focus on moving CPD-related content from your personal box accounts to the CPD box account. Most people don't realize that the stuff that you create here while you're employed at the CPD belongs to the university. And one of the downfalls of the way the university has set up their box system is that when you come in, you get your personal account, and a lot of us save our stuff on our personal account. But when you leave the university, all of that material is deleted. And unless you've saved it somewhere else or backed it up somewhere else, nobody else can have access to it. Nobody else can, it can't be recovered. It's just gone. And so a lot of this is project-related information, products, publications, things like that people have left, and we've lost years of work in some cases. And so Michael and me and others are trying to figure out how we're going to work on coordinating this and getting everybody to save their stuff on the CPD box account. But please, I think as you move forward, as you think about where you're going to save information and project-related materials, please talk with Michael to set up project box folders under the CPD box account so that we can continue to have access to the information that you create. As people leave, we don't want to lose this information. Unfortunately, it's happened a few times over the last year, and we want to try to avoid that in the future. Then performance appraisals. I was going to talk about performance appraisals today, but I decided we all have better things to do. I'm going to make a video introduction and a guide to performance appraisals this year. So it's going to be a little bit different, and it's going to ask you to be a little more reflective in the process. But again, please watch your email for this. Take some time. It'll be about a 15 to 20 minute sort of video introduction to what I'm requesting. And I want you to really think about how that process can really inform what you're going to do over the next year. And again, thinking about the goals that I'm going to share today, think about how your goals can support the goals of the CPD as you start moving forward. Performance appraisals are usually due to the dean by the end of March. So between now and March, your supervisor will be reaching out and setting up a time to conduct those with each of you. If you are a supervisor, you can go ahead and start scheduling a time and begin those probably the last week of January. And hopefully get those done mostly in February so that we can tie up loose ends in March and get them turned into the dean and HR on time. Okay, last but not least, NEARS. Yeah, I put it in somewhere different this time. I didn't put it at the end. If you haven't done it, go do it. That's all I'm going to say about that. So if you don't, Kelly and Mary Ellen are going to come after you. That's all there is to that. So NEARS is our national reporting. It's how we know if we're making progress. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it's the only thing we have to gauge our impact right now. So please go in and do it. And then finally, please take time to read Sharon's monthly staff communication email. Sharon sends this out every month at the beginning of the month. A lot of people come and ask me what's going on. Sharon's emails are comprehensive in terms of what's happening here at the center, and frequently they are pages long with all of the activities and things that people are doing. If you want to know what's happening and who's working on what and where people are going and what they're doing, those emails are the best way to do it. I know that it's one more email, and email is the greatest curse known to mankind and womankind, but it's the system that we use, and I would just highly, highly encourage you to pay attention to those emails. And then when Sharon sends out the call for information, please contribute so that we can share the good things that you're doing with the rest of the staff. Okay. Let's see. This is really touchy. Finally, in terms of a last announcement, this year we are hosting the first Disability Advocacy Day at the Utah State Capitol. This will be January 30th in the rotunda of the Capitol. It will be disability advocacy organizations from across the state, but the CPD is taking the lead on this. We have Lance Roberts, who is the head of the Administration on Community Living, who is our federal sort of oversight agency, is coming out and will be the speaker at this event, thanks to Sachin and his many connections. But we'll also have several legislators speaking at this, and community advocates, others. One of the things that we have at this event will be tables. If your program would like to have a table at this event, please let me know ASAP. I have to turn in the number of tables that we need set up by next week. And so if your program would like to have a table where you can highlight what it is that you do for legislators and the general public who will be there, please let me know so that I can get you on the list. I'm trying to think, Sachin, is there anything else I should remember about disability advocacy? Oh, there's the reception, that's right. So Disability Advocacy Day starts at 12:30 and will go till 4. And then at 4:30 till 6:30 is the traditional LCPD legislative reception. So essentially, It's from 12:30 till 6:30 time to meet with legislators and to meet with other advocates from around the state. And we're hoping this will be an annual event. We're actually really excited to be able to host it this year. So with that said, I've overwhelmed you with announcements. Now we're going to go on to something more exciting, research. So Mary Ellen and Vicki have spent the past year working on their CPD faculty fellow. Where did it go? I just had it. There it goes. Okay. Why won't it pull it? There we go. Okay. And we're excited to hear what happened with your project.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks.
So for those of you who,
Oh, sorry.
that's okay. Yeah, I can just, yeah, that'll work. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Ellen McLean-Verdos, and I'm an assistant professor over in the psychology department here at Utah State. And Vicki Simmons-Meyer, who I believe most of you know, we've been collaborating over the past year on a project looking at autism and reading. So we were one of the two groups, along with Eduardo, who were awarded the Faculty Fellows Program Award. So this is just an update kind of on what we've been doing the past year. I'm not going to spend too much time on the background, but just sort of a broad overview. There's a lot of research on autism in general, as many of you are probably aware. A lot of it has tended to focus really on the behaviors and symptomology and behavioral interventions in particular. There hasn't really been a whole lot of focus on reading or other academic areas, and so we wanted to narrow our focus and really focus on reading and reading comprehension specifically. So this is just sort of the background information as to why, to support that, there isn't a whole lot out there, and we think it's a really good area for us to sort of go into more in depth. So with our project, we submitted the proposal to really focus on a broad project that was really focusing on data collection, original data collection. And our two main goals for that was to look at reading comprehension measures, the standardized measures that you see in psychoeducational or psychological evaluations when identifying kids with autism, and also identifying and planning out their educational needs. We wanted to see if they were performing consistently across these measures, because practitioners have a lot of choices, and they might choose different measures for different reasons, but we were curious to know, are we measuring reading comprehension and reading fluency the same way across these measures? And we were also interested in looking at predictors of reading skills, because there isn't a whole lot out there either. I will say I put the asterisks there because we did get a lot of participants, but we didn't get as many as we needed to really run certain analyses to look at what's predictive of reading skills. So the focus of what we'll talk about today a little bit is really on that first part. We also had some secondary collaborations. Since we were doing original data collection, and part of the fellowship was to have products become, to be a result of this collaboration. We also had some sort of side smaller projects that weren't original data collection. So we ended up doing a meta-analysis of reading comprehension interventions for kids with ASD to see for who within that population and which different interventions are successful. And then we also ended up writing a book chapter for a book that focuses on interprofessional collaborations for serving individuals with ASD. So this is just a list of our team. We actually had a really large interdisciplinary team that helped us out. So Vicki and I were the primary investigators, the principal investigators, and we had two psychology graduate students who really did a lot of work for project management. And then we had a whole list of speech and language students and also psychology, both undergraduate and graduate level students, who helped with our data collection. And you'll see why in a second, why this was really important. So over the course of the year for the original data collection project, we had 55 participants. We had 35 who were typically developing, 14 who had a diagnosis of autism. We also had 6 that had a diagnosis of a specific learning disorder in reading. That was supposed or intended to be sort of just another control group, because they are a group that does have difficulties with reading. So our goal was to have around 60, so we did pretty well with that. All of our participants were between ages 6 and 16 and grades K through 11. And we needed so many people on the project because there were 3 clinic visits. And so we had a lot of measures that we were giving. We gave a full IQ test, a full language test, and then we did the reading domains of 4 different achievement tests, standardized achievement tests, and then we did a lot of rating forms that parents completed. So we did rating forms on autism symptomology, executive functioning, and attention. These are just really some basic preliminary results. We just finished up data collection. When did we finish? Yeah. So we didn't really have a whole lot of time before today to do too many statistical analyses. I will say we are seeing statistical differences both within groups and across groups, and we are seeing some differences in how the different measures, how different kids are performing across the measures. So you can just kind of see that there are differences across different measures. Some measures might be more accurate than others. We're not really sure what that specifically looks like yet, but some kids are performing much higher on versus others that they're performing much lower on, and in both groups, both kids with autism and kids without autism.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
For a person who knows nothing about those numbers,
Go into a little bit more.
is it just a snippet of information? Because I don't understand what you're telling me there.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. I wasn't sure how much I should go into. I only have like 10 minutes, so that's okay, sorry.
We can talk later.
No, we can go into it now. Is there anything specific? So are you looking at like what the scores mean just in general, or? So all of our standardized tests that we used here, the average score would be, the mean is 100, and the standard deviation is 15. And so these are the different tests that we gave. So the Wyatt, the Woodcock-Johnson, the KTA, and the GORT-5 are all pretty common tests that we would use to measure reading. And so you can see across reading fluency that the performance for kids with autism and kids without autism on the Wyatt was the highest, but for the KTA it was the lowest. And so what our question will be moving forward is, are those differences significant, and does that influence what tests we choose and potentially why? So if you think about decision making, a 92 is still in the low average range, but an 87 is a bit lower. And so, getting a 92 on one test for a practitioner versus an 87 might mean something completely different in terms of how we interpret those results and how we think someone's performing on a reading task. Does that help? Okay, you're welcome. So just a really quick snippet of our products that we've had over the past year. We actually were just awarded a small grant to continue this project for 1 more year. So we are starting now and we'll go for another year. So we had enough funding to continue this. So our plan is to collect more data so that we can have more than 55 participants and run some real analyses and hopefully get a publication out of it. We did apply to 2 other grants. They were not funded, so we applied to the Woodcock Institute twice, the second time it was funded. And we also submitted an initial letter of interest to the Organization for Autism Research, but we were not invited to apply, but we did get some funding, which is great. For manuscripts, we are actually, I was over working on the manuscript before I came here. So our meta-analysis, we've submitted it to 2 journals, both in the areas of special education and school psychology, but we're going to be submitting it to an autism-focused journal next. So we're working on that, and that should be out in the next week, I would think. We did have a book chapter accepted as well. We collaborated with someone in the special education department on this project as well, and it's focusing on reading and mathematics for students with ASD in schools, and how to promote success in those areas. And then we had a presentation on this topic at INSAR, which is the International Society for Autism Research in Montreal last year. So those were all pretty exciting. In terms of next steps, Vicky's planning to submit a presentation proposal to ASHA this year, and the call for papers opens up January 28th. And we are also, like I said, planning to write up the results the following spring after the completion of the grant, just to kind of wrap up what we've done. And we haven't really talked too much about any potential future grants, but I know we've talked about future projects, so that's always a possibility. Does anyone have any, how much time do I have, Matt?
You're got like
2-3 more minutes.
2-3, okay. So if,
Did you have more?
no, but I was just wondering if anyone had any other questions that I would be happy to answer them. I know it was sort of just a really huge rush to go through. Yeah, it is, but I am happy to discuss anything or if anybody has any questions about specific results.
Curious to, with your research question, what are your key findings?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Your research questions, what are your key findings?
Sure. So do you mean just in general or the specific results we have found?
What's most meaningful?
What's most meaningful? To me, at this point, it's going to be it will be most meaningful once we actually are able to run some analyses that can show significance, the difference between the performance on tests, because I think it'll be really informative to let practitioners know what or help guide them in choosing an appropriate reading measure. So that's kind of my hope for that.
How will you sort from? There's different performances across reading comprehension and reading fluency. Which one is a more accurate measure? Certainly there's differences, but how will you guide them as to which one is the more accurate measure?
That's a good question, and that will probably be something that we'll need more participants to look at that. But I'm not sure. Do you have any thoughts on that, Vicki?
I think one of the things we want to look at is some of the predictors, and that should be
Yeah.
a question. Hi, Norm. So some of the things we want to look at are the predictors. You know, is IQ a predictor? Is language comprehension a predictor? Is executive functioning a predictor? But we didn't get enough of the kids with autism to be able to come in, which, as a side note, our cancellation rate in families with children with autism was the highest. So there's a side finding all by itself. You know, we had as many of them scheduled, they weren't able to come. So I think once we get enough of those kids, we really want to look at those predictors. And if there's correlations between cognitive abilities and language abilities for some of those readings. And you know, schools are really focused on reading fluency. That's not really why we want kids to read. That's one measure of why we want kids to read.
And something too that'll be interesting, and a kind of related but different study that I'm doing, we're finding now that it's not necessarily the diagnosis, but more, which makes sense, but is more about attention and executive functioning. So we're finding a lot of differences based on those reading skills specific to attention and executive functioning more so. So I think, like Vicki said, having the ability to look at predictors will be helpful in determining. We've also discussed adding in curriculum-based measurements as well. To see how that relates, because that's another way to measure them. So I'm kind of thinking that somewhere a more moderate range is going to be a better estimate rather than ones that are really inflated or ones that have a low floor or they're having a floor effect for students. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes.
It's kind of a bigger question in some
Sure.
ways, but in some ways, isn't this kind of the square peg into the round hole issue, you know, and that our end goal is that we want autistic kids to learn more effectively, comprehend better, and you know, reading has not turned out to be their strong point in a lot of ways, and we know that kids with autism benefit from video instruction, works really well with them, and there's other things that work better than a reading-based approach.
Right.
And so in some ways, you know, you're going to help people pick the best tool, but in some ways that's kind of like, you know, whether you pick a hammer with a straight claw or a curved claw. Then we really want to kind of look at what's going to lead to building the house better, rather than just kind of focusing on the tools themselves.
Right, yeah, I definitely understand that. I think for us, the goal is more for identification purposes. So if a school, for example, is, you know, trying to decide if they think a student might also have a learning disability, or they might have enough problems with reading in order to really focus that for an IEP, for example. Kids are sort of on that line. They could either score really, if you're choosing one test, you could score higher and miss out on services potentially, or if you're scoring too low, you're not getting an accurate representation of their skills and abilities.
So we want the worst test for the autistic.
Well, you said it, not me. We want all kids to have all the services. Any other questions? Cool. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to exit out of this, so thank you.
Thank you. I know this is a broad audience here, And I know that not everybody here does research, and so some of this is above and beyond what you do on a daily basis, but it never hurts to be exposed to some of the bigger work that's going on out there. And I think this is important. This is actually this identifying the proper tool to measure the competencies and just to measure, to use with a population of people with disabilities is really important in a national dialogue. I was actually on a call before I came right before this, looking at how are we creating tools to assess mental health in people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And really, it's a very similar approach to this. What tools are the most sensitive and are the best to use when you're trying to assess for mental health issues. So this is very much, I think, in line with where the field is going. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and that you got funding to continue it. That's exciting. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so kind of as I said, last year was the first time we did the CPD Faculty Fellows. Eduardo and Lisa and then Vicki and Mary Ellen were the first. They sort of took that initial leap and sort of piloted the process. We learned a few things and we reopened the competition this year, and we funded 2 additional faculty fellowships. The new faculty fellowships, the first is Dr. Ann Larson, who's collaborating with Sue Olson in the early intervention program to test the feasibility and efficacy of telehealth home visiting in early intervention. So anything you should say about that, or is that, we'll leave it at that? Okay, we'll leave it at that. It is work that has been going for a while. I know it's a continuation of some work they were doing last year, so it's exciting to see that funded. And then Beth Fouth, in collaboration with Ty Aller over here, is going to look at expanding the mental health awareness and advocacy curriculum and assessment tool that I believe was your dissertation and your whole life prior to coming here.
Survives.
Yeah.
I survived.
It's still out there. So we're actually excited about those, and over the next year, about this time, we'll be hearing from Ann and Beth about the findings from those studies. The intent of the Faculty Fellows program is to really get folks from across the college to collaborate more with CPD projects and people. And so it's something that the dean is funding, and it's something that I would highly encourage all of you to look at taking advantage of. You don't have to have a PhD, you don't have to be anybody fancy to do this. You just have to have somebody in the college who wants to come in and work with you and maybe support some of the work that you're doing in your projects. So next year, it'll probably be next October, you'll see the call come out again. I'll make sure that I send it out, but again, it's never too early to start thinking about applying for this and maybe bringing in somebody from the college to help build capacity in the projects and programs that you work in. Okay, now for something completely different. 2020 objectives and key results. You guys can sneak out, yeah. Unless you really want to stay for this. Okay. Objectives and key results. Where are we going? The question, we've had our core grant, and I pointed out our core focus areas, and we have developed programs in these areas, but I think we've been missing a little bit in terms of how we move forward collectively as an organization. And so over the last few months, I've been working with the leadership team to identify some mechanisms that will help us move forward more cohesively, I guess is the right term. And one of the things that we identified was potentially using OKRs. Now, OKRs are a concept that comes from the business world. There are things that they actually started at Intel. And they have been used at Google and Yahoo and lots of tech companies. They're actually used across the tech sector, and they're used across the nonprofit sector now as a way to really drive results. They've been proven to be very effective. I wish I could say that we were the first ones to be implementing it here at USU, but the Huntsman School of Business started using OKRs to improve their programs this fall. So they're about 6 months ahead of us. Oddly enough, I have a wife who works in the business school who I've had the advantage of hearing their woes and have learned from that, and we're really kind of building on their experience with implementing OKRs in higher education. So what does this look like? So you'll see here there's a pyramid, and the pyramid it's sort of our organizational strategic hierarchy. So at the top of our pyramid is our mission, and this is why we exist. This is what we do, right? And below the mission is the vision. And our vision is the picture of where we want to be going. But right beneath the vision, we have our strategy. Our strategy is our broad priorities. These are our core goals. This is kind of the areas that we address as an organization. And really up to this point, that's kind of where things have ended. Strategy, and then everything underneath that has kind of happened in the projects, and people have done their own thing. We're going to add a couple of additional layers. Objectives and key results. And objectives and key results really break down that strategy is a 5-year snapshot of the areas we're going to focus on. It really doesn't give us enough information in detail about what we need to do to move forward as an organization. And honestly, that strategy, those 5 focus areas, don't address everything that we do. And they don't address things in terms of organizational culture or other factors that affect your day-to-day life here. So objectives and key results allow us to do that. And what they do is they give us more of a targeted focus on what we're going to do in the next 1 to 2 years. And the key results are how we will achieve. They're really the activities that we will use to achieve those objectives. So again, going back to that priming effect, this is our mission and values. Putting it up, I'm not going to read it again, but it's there. Our vision, our picture of the future is here. And this is something that we developed during our strategic planning 3 years ago. And it says our vision is to become an international leader in creating inclusive communities and improving the quality of life for people with disabilities and their family. Those of you who are new here probably are starting to learn that the CPD has a relatively good national footprint. Last year we worked in 46 different states, and we have several projects that operate on a national level. So we felt like we have a relatively good national impact, but we don't really have an international impact. And so this vision, which is looking 5 to 10 years in the future, we're looking at how do we expand the work that we do to more of an international audience and really expand outside of the US and provide our expertise and consultation services to others who maybe we traditionally wouldn't be accessing. Now, this is a challenge, and we won't go into the various pitfalls with this. Policy expertise here in the US does not lead itself to policy expertise in Kenya or other places. There are overlaps, but this is where we want to go. This is what we defined, and this is the direction that we're moving. So, again, going back to our strategic hierarchies, our broad priorities are right here. Healthcare, mental health, transition, employment, personnel development, and accessibility. And that's, again, where we'd ended. And it's felt like something's missing. So what we've done is develop these objectives and key results. In December, I met with the business team, and I met with the leadership team for an extended period of time to gather information on what areas we need to focus on over the next year or two to really move the CPD forward. And what we've come up with is 4 objectives and the key results underneath it. So each numbered one here is an objective, and then the letters are the key results. And I'll read through these. So the first objective, and again, these are what are called big, hairy, audacious goals. These are scary. They are aspirational. They are supposed to be intimidating. Not to the point that they paralyze you, but intimidating to the point that we realize there's going to be some work to get there. But this last year, our funding was the highest it's been in the last 6 years. Last year, we ended just below $20 million in terms of projects and income here to the CPD. Now, a lot of people say, well, you focus too much on money. Unfortunately, the money that we bring in is directly correlated with the number of services and the people that we can serve. So if we bring in more money, it means that we're serving more people. And so to a certain extent, and also just from a university perspective, the university sees our value in terms of the money that we bring in. That is really, they look at the CPD and they say, they don't really care how many people we serve. What they care about is that we're an extramural funding center and that we're bringing in funding. So to meet the university's requirements, to a certain extent, we have to focus on funding. So our first objective is going to be to increase the CPD's funding to $25 million annually by 2022. The CPD has never been at $25 million. If we were to make $25 million, we would be the largest USET in the country. We're actually right on the cusp right now. We're in the top 10, but we're not the biggest. So if we were to meet $25 million, we would be the largest university center in the US. To do this, the key results that we'll be shooting for will be to increase the number of proposals for grants or contracts through SPO, or the Sponsored Programs Office, by 25%. That's supposed to say over the next year. I didn't put that in there. Increase income from fee-for-service programs by 15% by 2022. Develop 2 new national centers or initiatives that are housed and administered by the CPD by January 2022. Develop 4 new partnerships with partner organizations that will support the development and expansion of CPD programs by January 2021. And then identify 2 mechanisms to publicly recognize staff for demonstrated excellence in new funding or program development. So you'll notice that with this, I've included the 2 values that are driving this: innovation and collaboration. It's going to take innovation and collaboration to achieve this key objective. So that's number 1. Okay? If it's scary, don't worry, I had to write these. I'm really scared. Okay. Objective number 2. Demonstrate a 25% increase in diversity in staff, leadership, partnerships, and people served. The values that this particularly addresses is inclusion and caring. The key results for this objective are going to be interview at least 1 female or racially, ethnically diverse applicant in each exempt level position search. B is to interview at least 2 females and or racially, ethnically diverse applicants for each senior level management search. C, develop a method to monitor and evaluate our effectiveness at reaching diverse populations by July 2020. Develop a set of resources and guidance on the CPD intranet and in-house technical assistance to support outreach to diverse communities by January 2021. And finally, increase the number of students from diverse backgrounds, including race, ethnicity, gender, and majors. I'm considering majors as part of diversity. We tend to serve psychology and certain majors, but really looking at how do we bring other majors in. We want to increase that by 20% by January 2022. Now, you're going to notice that this one is oddly specific. This one is oddly specific because we have learned that setting quotas doesn't necessarily work. I can't require that we hire X number of people from diverse backgrounds, but what I can do is encourage search committees to make an attempt to identify and to at least interview folks who come from diverse backgrounds, so that we're at least making an attempt to bring people in and to really get and to provide an opportunity for folks from diverse backgrounds to interface and to and participate in our programs. These are actually based upon the Huntsman School. The Huntsman School is very much male dominated, and they have one of their OKRs over the next 2 years is to increase their female faculty. And so these are modeled on theirs, where they're actually setting, you have to interview X number of female faculty for each faculty opening. We're doing something similar. It's been approved by the university to take this approach as a way to potentially increase the diversity in our staff here. So. Okay, that one's scary too. Okay, number 3, increase awareness in the college, university, state, and national level. Oh, I'm gonna have to edit that. About CPD's impact and importance. One of the things that the leadership team brought up is that we're doing a lot of good work, but it's not always being recognized, both here in the state, but also nationally. We work nationally, but not everybody sees that work. Now, I think over the break, there were a few things that were positive that really showed that we are on some folks' radar. I don't know if the Deseret News from December 20th, the head of the Utah State Higher Education, Utah State Office of Higher Education. Utah System of Higher Education, thank you. Craig Wolstenhume wrote a editorial all about the CPD and the importance of the CPD and published it in the Deseret News. We are making that radar, but I think that we can do better. And the better we do at really highlighting and promoting our programs, the more opportunities we will have to bring in new people and new funding. So as part of this particular objective, the key results are going to be develop a comprehensive PR and marketing plan as part of a CPD renaming and rebranding effort by January 2021. B is produce 4 new promotional videos highlighting specific CPD programs and impacts by January 2021. The thing that we are recognizing with social media and other forums online is that people are not reading things necessarily, and that videos get more view and more impact. And so we're going to be moving to producing more videos to highlight the work that you do. C is increase the exposure of CPD programs in state and national media outlets by 15% through targeted press releases and staff-generated editorials. This means that I will be reaching out and asking some of you to help write editorials about the programs you work in and the impacts that you have. D is increase CPD staff participation on university, local, state, and national committees, boards, and advisory groups by 15% by January 2021. Okay, finally, number 4 is, and this is our last objective, and I know these are a lot, and hopefully you're all seeing somewhere as I go through these where your particular background or your program fits in potentially. But number 4 is another one that came up with both the business team and with the leadership team. And it was that I will take the responsibility. I am not doing a great job at engaging the employees who are not currently here in Logan. Less than half of our employees live and work here in Logan. Most of them are out and about across the U.S. and the state. And a lot of those folks do not feel connected to what we do. And so we need to do a better job at creating a culture that makes all employees feel like they're part of an organization and where we're going. So this objective is intended to address that particular issue. So number 4, the objective is create a workplace culture that values all employees and provides the support needed to accomplish our primary objectives. And this one's based upon the inclusion and caring value. The key results underneath this one are create a workplace culture and wellness work group to provide input, guidance, and to and to assist with creating a more cohesive and inclusive workplace culture. You will see a call go out in the next couple of weeks asking folks to volunteer to be on this particular group. I'm looking for people at a distance and people here in Logan who want to help me develop methods and mechanisms to create a more cohesive workplace culture. B, create an associate director of operations position to oversee business and administration of operational aspects of the CPD by June 2020. C, create an associate director of strategic development position to coordinate and implement new programs and funding opportunities by January 2021. D is research and invest in technology and training that will increase opportunities for all staff to feel invested in the CPD as an organization and culture. On this one, the plan is going to be done by June 2020 with this work group, and then we'll start implementing it in July 2020. And then finally, conduct an annual organizational climate assessment and formal exit interview with all staff who leave the CPD to identify elements of organizational culture that can be improved and generate an annual report on exit interview and survey results. Boy, I should really proofread these before I put them up there. These have been through multiple iterations. I feel like you have no idea. But I think you get the general idea of where we're going. The B and C one are the ones that people are going to have a question about. B and C. When I came in a few years ago, 3 years ago, I felt like it was important for me to be involved in many of the things that associate directors in the past had done. I didn't know people in the state, and so I put myself on various committees, boards, and I took over really a lot of the tasks that associate directors had been doing in the past. Over the past 3 years, that's worked out very well, and I've actually met most of the stakeholders, and I'm involved, and I know most of the people in the state and nationally on a personal level now. Unfortunately, what it's doing is it's spreading me too thin so that I cannot focus on creating a workplace culture. I'm spread so thin running around with my head cut off that I can't actually do strategic things that are going to help the CPD grow. And so creating these associate director positions will hopefully allow me to offload and delegate some tasks so that I can focus more in a more coherent way on building the CPD and building new programs. So you're going to ask, where's the funding for those positions going to come from? I have no idea. So there you go. That's one of the things I have to work out. But if we don't set the goal, it's not going to happen. So that's why we've set the goal. So what I'm going to do is send these out in an email tomorrow. And what I'm going to ask that you do is that you look at these and review them, and you see how what you do fits potentially in with these goals and these objectives and key results. And as you write your goals for the next year, I want you to think about how do your goals help move us forward on at least one of these objectives and key results. We're still going to have our core goals. We're still going to be pursuing grants in healthcare and mental health and everything else. But as an organization, a lot of this underlying stuff has to occur in order for us to do that more strategic work. And so this is the level that I want to focus on in the next year, these 4 objectives. And again, I want you to think about how you can support them. So with that said, I'm not going to take questions now. I will set up a time in the next month where we can sit down and actually have a conversation and think about this. And this is actually going to be part of the video tutorial on performance appraisals that I'll send out in the next week or 2. But again, I will send these out. I want you to think about them. I want you to provide me feedback, input. I'm interested in your ideas. And if you want to be more involved in this A right here, please let me know about that too. So, okay, this is a rough transition. But one of the ways that we address, let's go back here. One of the ways that we address our diversity in staff, leadership, partnerships, and people served is we actually get training on it, and we understand what does it mean to be an inclusive workplace. And so with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Eduardo and Mary Ellen, who are going to continue their training on unconscious biases, microaggressions, and privilege. And let me pull up your presentation. Okay, did you want the video up too, Eduardo?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Oops, escape. Let me go back. So the video's right there. And then you need this.
Thank you.
Did you want to play the video first? Or?
Just I'm going to introduce.
Well, it's shorter than that.
We are going to be exchanging this.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. As always, it is an honor to share with you this presentation that we have prepared collaboratively, another value, with Mary Ellen. And it is a continuation of the presentation that we had before. The presentation before, we were establishing that there is disparities between groups here in the U.S. related with health, related with education, related with quality of life. And today we are going to talk about some of the factors that might explain part of those disparities. Mary Ellen, you want to say something to introduce?
You're good. Go for it. I'll pipe in.
Okay. So a good introduction for this presentation is a video that was prepared by Dr. Melanie Dominique Rodriguez, who is a professor at the psychology department. And I think I was planning to just to share part of the video, but Matt suggested that it would be good to share the whole video. It's around 10 minutes, but it's going to set up a good ground for discussion. That is what we want to talk today about unconscious bias, microaggressions, and privilege. That it sometimes seem like tough topics, but I think that if we have a dialogue, if we have a conversation, it is going to be very fruitful. So let's start with this video.
Good evening. Buenas noches. Imagine for a moment that you're walking across a grassy area, strolling on your way, when unexpectedly you step on dog poop. Are you there? This is how I feel when my prejudices are publicly exposed. I did not want to step in it. I did not mean to step in it. But now I've got a dog crap all over my shoe. And I'm the only person that can really do anything about it. So a few years ago, I was talking with one of my graduate students. She was a fellow Puerto Rican woman, Elisaida, and I was tickled to have a compatriot that I could speak Spanish with, but also indulge in all of the shortcuts that a shared culture and language afforded us, like dropped S's and the ability to conjure sights, sounds, and smells of standing in piñones, eating alcapurrias, without having to explain any of it. With a few words, we could literally travel together 3,000 miles. Now that is shared culture. And shared culture can bite you in the butt. I was telling Elisaida a story about someone who wasn't as bright as I had hoped. And in my excitement, I punctuated my judgment with, "Qué mongólico." What a mongoloid. Now, this is an expression I grew up with in Puerto Rico, and I'd never given it a second thought. But it only took me a second to register Elisaida's facial expression and hear the echo of my words. She paused. She looked at me in a neutral way, actually even kindly, and simply asked, "Did you just hear what you said?" And I had heard what I said, and I was mortified. Because here I was telling a story about something completely unrelated, and I got tangled up in a conversation about race and racism. Mongolism was a term used to describe children with Down syndrome. The term was coined by a British physician who, I believe, intended it as a put-down. John Langdon Down, the physician that coined the term, thought that children with Down syndrome had sort of a genetic reversal to so-called mongoloid characteristics that were more primitive than the much preferred and evolved white European ones. And in that swift description, Langdon Down connected a set of physical traits and intellectual capability with an entire cultural group in a way that was completely unwarranted. Now, when I used the expression, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. I certainly had no intention of hurting Elisaida, but I did. She was heard as somebody that cared deeply about diversity issues, and for her it was also personal. At the time, she had a very close friend from Mongolia, and my stupid comment was just one more assault on her friend. I didn't mean to hurt anybody, and the funny thing about intentions is that they matter a lot, and they don't matter at all. Tonight, I'm going to try to convince you that intentions both matter a lot and not at all in these sticky conversations about race and racism. Knowing that I didn't mean to hurt anybody helped me see that my behaviors and my values were not in alignment. I value diversity, so much so that by the time I had this conversation with Elisaida, I had devoted my career to the area. I went on autopilot, and I said something that had I truly considered it before saying it, I would have never said. Not because I didn't want to get in trouble, but because I didn't believe in what it meant. My intentions mattered in the conversation I was having with myself. My intentions helped me see and understand what I'm about and where I needed to grow. More importantly, my intentions helped me move away from this notion that being racist somehow means that I'm essentially evil or fundamentally flawed, and towards an understanding that I'm a product of the culture I was raised in, and that I make mistakes that are sometimes more reflective of this upbringing than of what I actually believe. But I was also having a conversation with Elisaida, And that is the conversation where intentions don't matter at all. In the moment, to be perfectly honest with you, I had to fight the urge to say, I didn't mean it that way. You're being too sensitive. I didn't mean it that way would have literally put up a wall between us. And even more so, attending to my intentions in that moment would have kept the focus on me. And when we hurt somebody, we need to put the focus on them. We also need to believe what they're telling us. And you're being too sensitive is just another way of saying, I don't believe you. So I had stepped in dog poop, and I needed to figure out how to move forward now that I had stepped in it. I've been in this position before and after the conversation with Elisaida, and I have supported colleagues, friends, and trainees in making similar mistakes where what they mean to say or do is not what they actually say or do. And in the process, I have happened upon a sequence of 4 steps that I think has been helpful to all of us. I call myself out. I acknowledge what I've heard. I apologize. I thank the person that has gifted me this learning opportunity. And whenever possible, and it isn't always, I offer amends. The first step can be really hard. I personally find it very painful to realize that I've been thoughtless or wrong. But calling myself out is like stepping into the light so I can have the conversation that needs to be had. And sometimes this is easier to do than others. But even when it seems easy, it's hard. In the conversation with Elisaida, it was actually relatively easy for me to see my mistake. And even then, my thoughts raised, my breathing quickened, and my hands grew sweaty. I had been caught in the racist act. And I tried observing all of this as it was happening, and I told myself what I often tell my students, this is a great learning opportunity. And I thought, well, I didn't want to slap myself, surprisingly. It actually slowed me down. The reminder helped me move away from my knee-jerk reaction and toward a response, which was the second step. Instead of reacting with, I didn't mean it, I could simply acknowledge my error and say, I'm sorry. Once I apologized, I could move to the next step, to say thank you. What really struck me in my exchange with Elisaida is that even though I had hurt her, she still trusted me enough to assume that I had the potential to learn something new. She took a risk when she stopped and asked me, did you hear yourself? And every day since that day, I have been so grateful to her for her courage. Thank you for helping me see something I hadn't seen in myself before. Thank you for helping me understand the difference between what I meant to say and what I actually said. And thank you for trusting me to accept this learning opportunity. The last step is to offer amends, and this is really tricky, especially in the case of a racist remark. I would so much rather step on somebody's toe hard. I could offer a bag of ice, I could offer a chair, I could pat the back, but what do you say when you've hurt somebody with your words? And it's so easy, again, to react rather than respond. Tell me what to do to make it better. And then waiting for that person to tell you what to do. Now, there's nothing wrong with being responsive to a suggestion or even soliciting one, but expecting that Elisaida would tell me what to do to make things better shifted the responsibility to her instead of keeping it where it belonged. And the point of offering Elisaida an amend, after all, is to support her healing, not to help save my face. And I've seen this play out, in fact, in a lot of different situations. Tell me what to do to make it better. Typical response is, it's okay, don't worry about it. On the other hand, if the person is really hurt or angry, you can find yourself in the middle of a heated argument. And none of those things are really what amends are about. If someone lets me off the hook and I take it, I have not sealed the learning deal. On the other hand, if I'm now caught in the middle of a heated argument, I've managed to both offend and agitate somebody. That doesn't sound so good. So instead, I take responsibility for my own learning, and I focus on communicating what I want to do now that I've learned something new. And in the case of my remark, I took responsibility for learning where the term came from and took steps to educate others and tell my story so others could learn from it. When these steps all come together, they actually convey a pretty simple and powerful message. You're right. I'm sorry. What I just said is not really what I believe. Thank you for pointing it out. And here's what I'm going to do about it. Now, these conversations are all very different. And I really don't want to be overly simplistic, but in reality, I find that I can use the steps pretty flexibly across situations. And my investment in cleaning up my mess after I have stepped in it has to do at one level with my desire to personally change and grow, but mostly with my passion to provide a good model for my students and for my daughters for how to build a more just society. And we can build a more just society with grand gestures, but I think for most of us in this room, we build a more just society in all of the daily interpersonal exchanges that reveal who we are and what we're about. Ken Robinson makes a great point in his TED Talk. He said that mistakes are stigmatized, and I could not agree more, especially when those mistakes reveal a part of our society that we'd much rather believe did not exist. But we have volumes of scientific evidence that show us that racism is alive, it is well, and it resides within each of us in ways that many of us are barely even aware of. So we are all gonna step in it, because shit happens. All of us have blind spots. We all go on autopilot sometime. And rather than to avoid making mistakes, or put up walls to guard ourselves once we've made them, I think the key to our collective success is to make different and better mistakes every time.
This presentation. So, the objectives, we are going to talk about unconscious bias, microaggressions, and privilege. As you can see, it's a very small topic. We can talk about those topics many months. But we are going to give you some pieces that I thought we think are meaningful for today. We are going to talk a little bit about definitions, practical cases, and potential impact that those little things that sometimes we think are small, but it can have a big impact in many areas of the individual. Health, education, quality of life, as we are going to see. We have, by the way, we had a an assignment for you that after talking with Matt, we think is gonna be afterwards and not before. And that is related with the IAT exercise, implicit associate test, related with a test related with unconscious implicit bias. Let's start with, because, this is, it was not the last interaction that I sent but of my PowerPoint. But let's start with the topic about microaggression. The definition said, microaggressions have been defined as a brief and common, daily. Brief, common, and daily. What does it mean? Frequency. It is related with frequency. It's not the magnitude, but it's the frequency. And we are going to use an analogy at the end from a different perspective about the mosquito. But in this case, I'm going to use an analysis of a mosquito also. When we got the mosquito bite several times in the same place, it creates a big problem. So it's the frequency. That can be verbal, behavioral, environmental, communication. So it's not only what we said, it is also how we said. It's also what we show. we can show, we can communicate in many different ways. It's not only the verbal part. We can send a message from many different ways. And we can see here, it's behavioral. Can be non-verbal. I know when my boss is upset just with a look. You know, I know what does it mean. So the message is in many different ways. Can be intentional or non-intentional. I think that part is critical because it is going to create the discussion in the other topic related with bias versus prejudice. When it's intentional and when it's unintentional, it has a different meaning because we can be mean purposefully, but also we can be mean without that intention. And the presentation, I think, is a great example when it is unintentional, but still in my heart. It can create a negative impact. That transmit hostile, derogatory, or negative messages to the person because they belong to an stigmatized group. It sends a message. And usually, the stigmatized group are vulnerable populations. So it's based on race, it is based on ethnicity, it can be based on disability status. It can be on many different factors. And it happens everywhere. When I was preparing this PowerPoint, I just put the places where it happens to me. And it was everywhere. At the park, at the store, at the clinic, in the school, at work, in social events, in the media, in office settings, on the street, by phone. It happens everywhere. And that is the point that these microaggressions can be small, but are frequent. And it's biting. It is interesting when I have some conversations with some friends and we start talking about this topic. Oh, the conversation got very long because always we have something to share. For example, at the park, a friend who is the mother of 2 beautiful blondie children. And she said, you know what happened to me at the park? Somebody came and said, oh, you love him like you are the mother. You know, why the assumption? Why? And that is repetitive. And she said, did you get upset? Oh, she said, no, it happens all the time. All the time. That is the point. At the store, at the clinic, at the school. You want to jump in?
We had, in our IDASA class that we teach this past semester, we had a woman in there who is, I don't know if I pronounce it right, Maori descent, and she's married to a Caucasian man, and she went in by herself to a bank to cash a check. And they asked her for 3 forms of ID to cash that check. And it wasn't a very large check. And so she was searching around in her purse trying to find 3 forms of ID that she could give them. And I guess she was taking too long, and her husband came up and says, honey, what's the problem? And the bank teller says, oh, is this your wife? Here. And she cashed the check right away.
And usually, again, it happens to vulnerable populations related with race, gender, ethnicity, disability status, labor roles, social class, age, and many others. We can talk about many cases, but remember, my intention here is to be interactive because it happens to all of us. Just a few examples that I upload. What are you? Human. What? What? Is a thing? Being biracial doesn't make me a what? And it happens very frequently. No, where are you really from?
For me, and probably other people, it would be helpful, and I don't, kind of putting you on the spot, but I think it would be really helpful to say, how could we rephrase that? Could you provide an example of how you could rephrase that first one?
Sure. Asking is very important without that assumption. I think that many of our interactions have a lot of assumptions, have a lot of stereotypes, and sometimes even stigma when it is, different levels. When we make questions, it's better if we are making neutral questions. I feel, for example, I feel comfortable, and it might not be the only way that I feel comfortable when somebody tell me your story. What is my story? What I want to say? Remember that, and we are getting in our identity that our identities are social constructions. It's how we see ourselves. So if we can describe from ourselves, is going to be a better answer on how you phrase that question. It is coming from us. It's not coming from the other person. You are giving us the opportunity to describe ourselves. Not the other way, that you are describing myself based on what you see, what you think, what you believe. Because many of those interactions might be unintentional. I agree. But it doesn't mean that doesn't have that impact. Mary Ellen, keep jumping.
You're doing good.
No, where are you really from? Again, we are assuming. We are assuming. It happens, I have classmates who were from Asian descent, but they were American. And at the registration office, always they were asking that question. And he felt uncomfortable. Why that question? Again, it's the assumption. It's like they are looking with the other eyes and not asking from the person.
So, real life example, from a business perspective, when we hire an individual, the university requires that we ask of their race and ethnicity. What is the proper way to word that then?
Well, again, it can be many different ways. But if you explain that to me, exactly what you said, I'm going to be very comfortable in answering. The university requires this information. So I am not assuming it's part of the protocol. that probably has different levels. And we are going to get there, because I think part of the discussion is not only individual, it's also related with the organization, it's also related with the community, it's also related with policies. So the approach need to be at different levels. So in this case, if the university is requiring, sometimes the questions make you uncomfortable, like, you know, the census, the past census. When they were giving me the chance to put in one box my ethnicity, that I didn't feel that I was part of it. I usually send back the census with a long paragraph written in there, explaining that my answer doesn't fit in those boxes. And the census questions are, you know, are the model, are the template that we use for many different surveys, for many different questionnaires. So the...
Can I answer Richard's question? I think that what you...
Become really loud.
Yeah, what you just said, I think is important. Like in this case, I had a coworker when I worked at the University of Idaho at the Confucius Institute. He was Korean, and people would say, "Well, where are you from?" And he's, "Well, I'm from Palouse, which is a little town outside of Moscow." And they say, "No, where are you really from?" And this is something he'd get all the time. And of course, they want to know what's his race or ethnicity, but they don't ask that. People are uncomfortable asking that. People want to. Where are you from? Well, why don't you just ask, what is your race? What's your ethnic background? What's your racial background? But we try to avoid that. We're very uncomfortable actually using, I think, the words of what we really intend, which is where it gets to the microaggressions thing. We're not saying what we really mean because we're not quite comfortable using those words. And I think the best way around it is ask what you really mean. Say what you mean. Don't assume that somebody's going to. Yeah.
They could say, I'm not comfortable discussing.
Yeah, they could say, I don't want to answer that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Hadith.
So that's what I learned from Jeff. He did that in our class last semester, and we did it again today in a class that's speaking together. And I like talking about rewording phrases. That's what I learned, and I think it's genius and very respectful. So instead of asking where you're from, you can just ask, where do you call home? And just receive the answer and move on. So people sometimes answer to that question from the place that they were born, or the place that they lived their life, or whatever they feel belong to. So that's their home, and just get the answer and move on.
There are different ways to approach, and you always are going to have some challenges with rewriting, because from my perspective, for example, I can see challenges in that, what you call from home.
My take on it is, why should people care? You know, if you're going in there to, if you're going in the store to buy something, if you're going to work with somebody, you know, regardless of what they look like or where they're from, you know, the only thing you're going to use if you're asking that question in some ways, it can be curiosity at times, but it also seems to be something you want to put people into a box. And why put people in the box in the first place? Why just not say, here's the job we've got to do, let's talk about what the work is. As you get to know somebody, you know, maybe they'll tell you more about where they're from, maybe they won't, maybe they're not comfortable with it, but why not just kind of approach people on face value and say, you know, we've got to do this task together, let's work together. Or, you know, I'm here in the store, you're here to help me, let's get what we need.
Sachin.
So, you know, as humans, we are generally very inquisitive and curious. So we're always trying to find out what, you know, which you can't tell right away. But, you know, when I hear the question, where you're from, which I get asked almost always, no matter where I am, even before I start speaking, you know, so they don't even hear my accent at all. The assumption is I'm not American. So what is American? Someone who's white. So, well, I don't fit that general assumption. So if you're not white, where are you from? So it's an automatic assumption because you don't belong to a quote-unquote group that is associated with in America, and you always assume you don't belong here, so you should belong somewhere else.
One thing I think it's important to remember though is like she said, taking shortcuts, you know, and you said putting somebody in a box. It is important to remember that our brains are always looking for shortcuts. They're always looking for heuristics because we couldn't survive without them. And, you know, kind of what I was thinking in terms of this discussion is, you know, if we were to, you know, say we can't necessarily rely on any Western idioms or Western, you know, cultural things, I mean, we couldn't get any work done, right? You know, in terms of, there are those shortcuts that we have to use. You know, we might use expressions that somebody that hasn't grown up in the United States would have no idea what we do. So I, you know, that's kind of why I was asking, you know, how do we rephrase this question? Because our brains are gonna still look for ways to make shortcuts, you know, and you know, maybe, you know, like Matt said, maybe the answer is, you know, asking those questions more directly, you know, what you mean, you know, by that question. If that makes sense.
I'm gonna pass the mic around so that the transcriptioners can hear it. Sorry. I'll be the errand boy.
I think like a lot of people have hit on this, but at the end of the day, I almost feel like it's what is your purpose behind asking it? Are you creating a microaggression or are you being serious? And I think when you know that as an individual, that's how you're going to ask it, right? I mean, if I really want to get to know you, I'm going to be cognizant of your feelings, and I'm going to respect you, and I'm going to say, you know, oh, like, where's home? And unless I'm trying to be mean, I suppose, and look at you and say, well, where are you from? You know, I think it's really what's the purpose behind what you're getting at.
Absolutely. That point is an important one, because it's the context. It's the context. Also, always is not you know, equal or peer relation interaction. When the power is unequal, that question might have a different meaning or matter for each person. I think those conversations are important because there is not only one answer, and there is not only one correct answer, but we know the impact and the meaning. And probably we now have a framework how to deal with those situations, because we can recognize when something is not well received. And we need to, as we are going to see later, we need to have a plan how to deal with not only those questions, with many different situations. And I put it here some examples that might be very trivial, but they are not in many situations. Where we might think that when we ask, oh, you are so articulate, where is the negative connotation? In the context. In the context. It can be the context. Sometimes that context might, that phrase can be okay, but there are other phrases that might not be okay. And we need to be paying more attention to the context and those interactions. And I want to, as a sociologist, I want to reinforce the importance of interaction, because interaction is an important element of community. Community has place, individuals, and the other element is interaction. For community to be very effective, and we know that diversity is a good thing, the interaction need to be crystal clear, so everybody is in the same page.
I just want to I'm here as the example, okay, the token example of these things. On this disability one, a couple examples that I have of this, when we were having the construction going on with the new building, I was coming in my wheelchair across the parking lot, and a cement truck was waiting to get into the area to pour some cement in. And they were waiting for me to get out of their way, and he was, as far as I could tell, he was being very patient. But apparently the construction worker didn't think he was being patient enough, so he just came up behind me and he grabbed my wheelchair and he just pushed me out of the way. And I didn't know he was behind me, and I thought my wheelchair had hit a bump or something. I just threw up my arms because I was startled. I was scared that my wheelchair had broken because it happened before. And then my sister and I, we went shopping in Walmart for groceries. She goes to Walmart every morning for her office to buy food for the office, Matt. She buys food for the office. Pastries and fruit and milk and stuff. Anyway, so she was very well acquainted with the greeters when they had greeters there at Walmart. So this one Saturday, Suzanne and I go in, and the lady greets her at the door, and she goes, "Oh, that is so nice of you to take your handicapped little sister out shopping." And my mouth just dropped, and so did my sister's, and I don't know what we mumbled, but we were both pretty much offended by what that lady told us. And it was not intentional. I know she did not intend to offend us, but it was very offensive to me that it gave me the feeling that I was totally incapable of doing anything by myself, that I'm stuck at home, and the only time I get out is when my sister decides that it's time for me to get out of the house and get some exercise.
I would even clarify that it's when your sister has the charity to take you out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it felt.
And remember that sometimes the interaction doesn't need words. Several times. When we were preparing for this presentation with Mary Ellen, said, "Shall I add an additional story?" She said, "No way. We are going to be plenty of that." And that is true, because sometimes we don't need even words. Sometimes when I went to the store, for example, Claire was interacting with the people, the customers that were in front of me. And when I got there, the complete transaction was wordless. So, it was a very complete different interaction. Does it have some meaning for me? Yes, it did. I start the conversation many times. But, again, remember what the definition of microaggression, the frequency, that mosquito bite, over and over and over. Sometimes they say, "Okay, that's fine. Today is fine." And it can be verbal, non-verbal, behavioral, environmental. You can find many different ways to of those cases of microaggression. Let's keep continue, because I want to hear from you, from your cases also, because each of us is unique. It's not only from those groups that we are talking, but also I think it's your turn. Think of something you have been called that you didn't like or offended you, and how did it make you feel?
Turn that around. Anyone has? Okay.
So I had a few experiences in high school. So because they were aware that I had a social disability, they would, some bullies would always offend me, like they would always call me retarded and I'm not smart enough, and it fairly offended me. Then eventually, when I was a senior in high school, I stand up to that high school bully to make him silence himself so he would never offend me again. So that was a good experience. So I didn't know I had the courage to stand up for myself.
I lived in California for a while, in Southern California, and I was pregnant and had, 2 or 3 kids with me at the time, and I had several people call me different names. One that stands out is because I was having multiple kids, right? So it was odd for them to see. And they called me a factory. But I was called other names too. Like, you shouldn't reproduce more than just you. And anyway, that was hurtful.
Oh, we have a lot now. Okay.
When I first moved to Utah, my first day went to the faculty room at the School for the Blind to meet some of the teachers, and they knew I was new and outside of the state, and they started talking about how I was a Gentile, and all the problems the Gentiles were bringing to Utah.
So mine is pretty similar, is that I was at a visit, and I'd been in this family's house for the last 6 months, so I had had a really strong relationship with this family, but didn't know the Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam song, and so they asked me to leave their home when they found out I was not Mormon.
Mine's rather simple. I'm blind. That says it all.
Hey, Scott.
I hate to say it, but this happened just yesterday. I was working with one of my clients, and we had just got him to the point where he could walk up to the counter, ask for the hiring manager, and ask if they were hiring at a job. And so we walked into a local that shall not be named food chain restaurant that had a big sign in the window, now hiring, and so I was back there, cheering him on with my eyes, and he approached and asked if they were hiring, and they gave him a flyer, but they said, oh, we're not hiring here, we're hiring at another location. And so as we walked back out, I looked at the flyer, and it had very clearly their address, and the sign was on their window, but they were hiring for a store in Wellsville, supposedly. And I couldn't get the story out of my head. I just wonder. I just wonder.
Thank you for sharing.
So one family example, not me personally, so I hope it's okay. My father's blind. And people know that he's blind because he's with my mom all the time. Well, someone wants to help him. Here, let me help you, across the street. Grabs his hand, whoom, let's go, and he runs with him. Well, duh, my dad doesn't know where you're going or what you're doing. His back is so sore from, drops and stairs or bumping into doorways from people wanting to, quote, help, and not really understanding, can I help you through the doorway? Can I help you do something?
So I'm going to share one. Can I share one? This is one that happened to my wife it was a few weeks. It was a couple months ago now. She was out on a walk in our neighborhood, and we live in a relatively traditional neighborhood, and she was meeting a new neighbor, and the new neighbor, they were just visiting on the street walking the dog, and they asked my wife, well, what does your husband do, right? As though she didn't have a job, or when the assumption was she stayed at home and watched the kids and everything else, and that she didn't have employment. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. And as you can see, everybody has a story. And because of the time, Mary Ellen is showing me the time. What I want to remind you is that part of the definition of microaggression is the frequency. How many happens to some of you compared with some of the vulnerable population, where the frequency is there, is over and over and over. Because we can resist sometimes one or few times. But when it is very repetitive, the self-fulfilling prophecies becoming, especially when those are negative, especially when those are derogative, is the frequency. Because I'm sure that to some of you, that didn't happen frequently. Let's keep going. Marial.
I have one really quick question just on that. Does the literature say, or is it your opinion, that role-playing works? Role-playing through these scenarios can help people improve?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is different ways to address the situation, but some might be more effective than others. Because maybe when we are doing a role play, sometimes the feeling is not that intense than when it is happening, when somebody is sharing something that really happened to you. Because it's that feeling, it's that part that we don't forget. Mary Ellen, privilege.
We only have a couple minutes. We're going to touch really briefly on privilege. What are some of the areas that you feel you are privileged in? Shout them out loud.
Being male.
Male. White.
Education, yeah.
Education.
Economic status.
Economic status.
Equal with everyone.
Equal with everyone. Next slide. These are just a few of the ones that I came up with. And I do have listed on there that disability is a privilege. It is a huge privilege, because I have found that places where I go to, people want to pander to me because they don't want to offend me, and so they will listen to me. So the trick is to say something that's going to grab their attention, so after they're through pandering to you, they're actually going to listen to you. And so how many of you, when you go to a doctor's office, worry about, the next slide, getting on the table? When I go to the doctor's office, I avoid going to the doctor's office because I can't get onto the table. Privilege is missing there. You can go in, you can get into the doctor's office, you can get on the scales. Thankfully, I can't get on the scales, so that's nice. That's a privilege. But you can go in, you can go into the doctor's office, you can get on the tables, you can get into the dentist chair. I went just in October, and I had to go to the dentist to have a tooth filled, and I really got my workout trying to get into the dentist chair because they're not accessible. Into the eye doctor's place, they're not accessible. And I feel it's really quite ironic that a hospital, a doctor's office that should cater to those with disabilities and illnesses are not accessible to people with disabilities. A few years ago, my nephew, who works over at DSL, you have to talk to him sometime when he did his motocross racing, and he broke his arm really bad, arm that was actually his good arm. And we went to Brigham Hospital because he had to have it set, of course. And so they called me and my sister to come in and pick him up so that we could bring him home. It turned out that he had to actually have surgery on the arm, and so we were there for several hours, and I asked him if I could use the restroom. Because I went around the entire hospital, there was not one single bathroom that was accessible. Not one single one. I had to ask the nurse if there was any place, and he says, well, you can go to the nurse's dressing room. Privilege. Don't forget that you have it.
And to make it even more complex, because of time, I'm going to be very succinct. Can you imagine when we added, we intersect different groups? When it is a female, Hispanic, Latino person with disabilities. We are adding so many more layers that make it even more difficult, those situations. So here comes the dilemma. What we need to do? What can we do? And I hope that we are going to have in the future more time to keep discussing, because as you can see, it becomes complex, and we can discuss bites, but are important bites. Think about the message that we are sending. At the individual level, the presentation gave us a good framework. We need to acknowledge. We need to apologize. We need to say thank you for the lesson, for the learning. And we need to fix it or make a plan for the next time, how we are going to deal with. Because if we don't do that, not only when it is impacting directly, but when we are witnessing that it is happening, we are becoming part of the problem as well. And Mary Ellen has a very nice ending note that I think is an important message for us.
It's the very last one on here. It says, one person can make a difference. If you don't believe me, you have never tried to sleep with a mosquito buzzing around your head. Right? So make a difference.
Beat those mosquitoes. Thank you. I appreciate your time and attention.
So Eduardo had a lot more material there than we had time to get through. But it's a balance between what we can give you, and I think if there's anything to take away from today, it's thinking about how do we address and interact with others, and how do our assumptions inform and maybe shape those interactions. So if we can just try to be mindful over the next, for the rest of our lives, honestly, about how we talk to others and how we think about diversity, those who are different, and how we create situations, programs, organizations that are more inclusive, I think we'll be well on our way to making a better world. So in terms of last final things, upcoming staff meetings, April 14th and September 8th will be our next 2 staff meetings. For those of you who are new, we only do 3 per year, so used to be 4, but I can't handle the 4th one pushing me over the edge. So April and September will be our next staff meetings. Please try to schedule. I give you enough advance warning that hopefully you can schedule around these. It's important that everyone be here. And going back to the boat metaphor, if we're all able to understand what's going on and be moving forward in sync, we're going to be a lot faster and a lot more coordinated in the long run. And then finally, I'm going to end with what I end every staff meeting presentation with, and just really reinforcing the idea that we need to be intentional in what we do, and we are interdependent. The CPD is not an independent entity striving for self-preservation. The CPD is the hub of an engaged community of stakeholders, and we strengthen our organization by building up, investing in, and connecting the interdependent stakeholders within that community through collaborative and intentional efforts that strengthen the community as a whole. I think that's important to keep in mind as we move into the next year. So thank you. We have dessert downstairs in the lobby. I think Sharon snuck out to go get it set up, so please join us in the lobby. If you're virtual, I'm sorry you can't join us this time. I'm working on it. That's one of the big goals this year, is to figure out how to send dessert to each and every one of you. So, okay, thanks everyone. Have a great. Only 3 minutes over. Only 3.